Hello YouTube, and especially all you knife people out there. Finally got a new knife in today, and I wanted to share it and a couple of thoughts with you today. And that knife is the Bark River Camp and Trail. Now, for the first time ever, I changed up the handle material. Typically I go with micarta or a wood, but this time I opted to go with sheep horn. And the reason I did that was, well, twofold. First of all, based on the photos I could find online, and as well as Virtuovice's description, who happens to be one of the few other owners of this knife who's done a video on YouTube at this time, the scales, the handles for the knife looked rather thin in the wood. I don't mind handles that are slightly thin, but too thin on a really long knife, I just find it uncomfortable. So I looked at some pictures online, and I looked at his video, and they looked kind of narrow. On the contrary, I found images on Bark River's website that happened to then go over to the DLT website that they use for the knives that they ship, and the images are cool for two reasons. One, they show the exact knife handle that you're going to get from that provider. So when Bark River takes a picture of a knife saying sheep horn number 1 or ironwood number 2, and they tabulate that it goes to DLT or to KSF or something like that, then you know exactly which handle you're getting. So that's the first thing. The second thing was that it was cool because it showed that the handles appeared significantly thicker than those provided with the wood handles or even the micarta. Now, I hadn't had any experience with the sheep horn or any type of bone or anything like that before, so I wanted to try it. The second reason, and I hope I've kept all this in order, the second reason I wanted to try sheep horn, despite the fact that it's significantly more expensive, is due to the fact that it does have groove, it has texture. And because one of my biggest complaints about Bark River is that the handle materials are typically pretty slick regardless of what you get, even in the matte finish, I wanted to try something that naturally had a little bit more of textures to it. So I'll show you that in just a second. The first thing I wanted to do while I had this video up was to show you guys a shortcut I take when I'm trying to determine how big a knife is. For example, the Camp and Trail from the video camera perspective looks massive. It looks like a really big knife. The photos make it look big. Then you have the kind of the guard, and then the choil area, then the blade. Everything about it looks really big. And I wasn't sure if that would be something that I would be interested in carrying or not, since I'm not a fan of super huge or super heavy knives. Now, Virtuvice kind of laid to rest the fact that the knife is typically pretty lightweight, and I found that to be true, and I'll show it for you with my scale in just a minute. But what I decided to do was do a comparison between known knives that I've tried before based on, well, an experiment that I did in Photoshop. And if you're familiar at all with photo applications, especially Photoshop, if you've not tried this before, it is an exercise that's pretty easy to do and give you a relative idea of what size knife you're looking for. So here's an example of what I did. And what you'll see here are 4 knives. Now, the top is the sketch that is online that Bark River did showing the design layout. Now, obviously, these are really hard points and stuff on the edge of the knife up here, but it serves as a good size pattern. So what I did is I put program lines, I put guidelines in the program, and then looked up the proposed length of each of these blades, and then lined the butt of the knives up, and then scaled them to their size based on the length that's determined by the specs provided by the manufacturer. And what that does is puts an unknown knife in relative size comparison to knives I have tried before. The biggest thing you want to do is make sure you get the length and stuff right, and hold down the shift button when you're pulling, if you're using Photoshop, to keep the knife ratio, or whatever you're doing, the ratio of that image consistent. You don't want to have something go really long and be really narrow. But this is really good because what I'll often do is I'll even cut these out and on cardstock or something, and kind of put them in my hand and see just how the size is going to relate. So on the bottom here is a Fox River, then the Enzo Camper, then the Fall Niven S1, and finally the knife in question this time around, which was the Bark River Camp and Trail. Now, as you can see, relative to the Fall Niven and the Camper, 2 knives which I've used and both of which I happen to really like, however, 2 knives which I no longer own myself, it looks right in that same category. So just to give you an idea how well this works, and I will tell you this, the one thing you do want to remember is when you're looking for photos, try to find them side on if you can. It's not always possible, kind of the reason I used a sketch here instead of an actual image, because usually there's a perspective slant and that will change the dimensions or the look of the knife. But if you can find a good side on view of the knife, cut it out or somehow extract the knife and put it in a comparison, it works well. The other thing you want to remember to do is when you go to print these, depending on your printer, you want to make sure it's scaled 100%. Sometimes printers scale to fit due to some sort of bleeds or something that they arbitrarily put on documents, but if you leave it scaled 100%, it works pretty well. So I'm going to introduce you to my Bark River Camping Trail relative to this knife layout to show you what I'm talking about. Here it is, more of a close-up on it in a minute, but I'll line it up with the diagram here, and as you can see, it's pretty close. This isn't exactly lining up right here because this is very blocky, but if you had found an actual photo of this knife, you're going to get somewhere in the 98-99% range on the size that you're dealing with. Now obviously it doesn't demonstrate girth or anything like that. I don't want to get cut. I'm going to try to move this somewhat relative to show you what I'm talking about there in length. Okay, so hopefully that's focusing for you and you get an idea. So if you have experience with a knife and you're looking at another knife and you think, man, that knife looks huge or that knife looks small, if you have access or any type of familiarity with a photo application, it's a good trick to help you determine, hey, is that knife going to be in my size range? Now weight in obviously you know, contours and things like that are all in experimentation, but this made me very comfortable. This knife, I don't know, in my head relative to these other knives, felt like it was going to be a lot longer, but as you can see, size-wise, it matches up very well with two knives that I did like in this blade range, and I'm very happy with the end result. So kind of a tip there for any of you guys that haven't tried it in the event that you find that helpful. Okay, so back to the knife in question, and that is the Camp and Trail. Here it is in sheet porn. I'll see if I can get this to focus a lot closer up here and not on the background. You see really beautiful handle contouring. And the thing about sheet porn is you're never going to get the same thing on both sides. Now, Bark River did an extremely good job of keeping all the metal and the rivets and everything fairly well balanced. You can see these rivets fall in these grooves, and it did an outstanding job. The blade is pretty reminiscent of a Bravo. I haven't tried the LT, but it is a little bit thinner than I remember my Bravo being, but thick enough to sufficiently do the work that I would need it to do. Currently only available in A2 steel, which I don't find to be a huge problem. 3V would be nice, but it would make this knife extremely expensive because the A2 and this knife in sheet porn is going to run you right around $400, depending on if you get the liners or not. Now, I did get mine from DLT Trading. I love Jason and the work that all of the people do up there. Chris was outstanding with helping me pick this out. She actually opened the knife, put it in her hand, kind of tried to describe it to me. But see this little red blemish? I call it a blood spot right here. It's just kind of in the horn itself. If you looked at this online, and it's still available on the Bark River Gallery site, you'll see in the annotation at the bottom, it says DLT, so it lets you know it's going there and what the sheet porn number is, and so you're actually getting exactly what's photographed, which is really nice if you're interested in patterns. So the first thing is, if you've never tried sheet porn, which I never personally have, at least from Bark River, it's actually still pretty slick. It's almost like a marbly finish everywhere. There's not these nice indentations, these canyons almost, if you can see them there. Hopefully this is going to focus here. Trying to get this to not focus on the background there. These indentations are like little valleys and stuff, and I wanted them to provide a little bit of texture for my hand so it's not so slick. Now, there is no texturing right here under the thumb if you're right-handed like I am. Left side, you do have a little bit there, but in reverse holding and everything like that, I don't feel that there's quite as much slippage. I really do like this material, and it's still lightweight and naturally, obviously, very tough. So I am liking this, but it is very much a premium. Beautiful, still a little bit slick, but I love it, okay? So the first thing is you get textured handles. If that's not your thing, then obviously don't go with a sheet porn. I've not tried Impala. Impala looks like it's a little bit more consistent in its grooving, maybe slightly sharper, if you will, on the peaks of each of the the horn lines, but this is really good. It does provide enough texture that I don't feel like it's going to slip. If I want to get in a, different holdings and things like that, it feels really good. The other advantage is this. I should tell you this, watch this video and then go over and check Virtuovice's video. In fact, until I link my video field test of this, which I plan on doing in a couple months, I am hammered here at work, but I do hope to get out maybe sometime in November and test this out in the field. More comments on preliminary tests I've done so far, but look at his handle. Now he recontours his a little bit with sandpaper, but when he shows you the top down, his knife is very, very thin by comparison to this. So to further mirror that, I'm trying to get this to focus here, hopefully it is. This palm is not just a swell, it continues all the way to the back. It's actually like a bushcrafter handle in that it's thinner toward the front and it continues to expand toward the palm area and then thicken out and stay thick throughout the base. But this is noticeably thicker than the version that Virtuovice demonstrates in his video, and I can understand why he would say, hey, this is a really thin handle. To me, this thickness does constitute a good bushcraft handle in my experience. Everybody has different preferences, but I like a little bit thicker handle, and this gives me that, and I like texturing, this gives me that, and I like Bark River blades. This obviously gives me that. So it is a premium, but so far I haven't used it. I'm not, disappointed with how much money I spent on it. I wish it was less expensive, but hey, it's a $50 basically markup to get this type of scale versus like a Desert Ironwood, and noticeably more than if you get something like a micarta. This knife can be had for relatively good price, in my opinion, if you don't need a premium handle, you don't care if they're slippery, or you've never found them to be slippery. So there you go. But I'm going to show you something now on the screen, and this is a top-down image provided by the Bark River website, so I'm not trying to steal anybody's copyright. It is their material, but I'm trying to actually do Bark River justice. Here's a top-down look at a wood scale handle with liners. So they only typically shoot top-down when you get the wood scales, but here's a contrast with the sheep horn. Now I'm going to kind of toggle back and forth. So the perspective's off just a little bit, but you can see a noticeable difference when it gets to the back of the handle, and that's a useful thing to look at to use when trying to determine what type of handle is going to work for you. So my initial thoughts on this knife are, one, it's beautiful. I love the sheep horn. I love the way it feels in the hand. It's extremely lightweight, as Virtua mentioned, deceptively light for a knife this size. I will get the scale out in a minute, but it feels good in the hand. All I've done with it so far is done a little bit of feather sticking, some notching. I shaved the bark off some green wood with the spine. I threw some sparks with it, just basic stuff I could do on my back porch without too many worries. Does it all without hesitation. I find it to be very good at feather sticking, as good as any other Bark River knife I've tested. Better so than some of the thicker geometry blades like the Bark River Bravo 1. Again, haven't tested the LT, maybe we'll do that in the future, but I find this geometry to work very, very well. It is a full height convex, so there is no real flat area. In my view, at least, it goes from the spine straight to the edge and nice convex. There is appear to be a slight micro bevel that comes with it. Not too much of a problem for me because it will eventually come out on stones. I've just dropped it back up to sharp after messing with wood and stuff, just on Bark River white compound. No issues there. I don't know if this is going to focus or not, but the only thing that I did notice from the factory is there's a slight recurve here in the grinding. It's not completely flat. I don't know if you can see that kind of right in here. But if I set the knife flat, like I did my Canadian Special, on a flat surface, there is light that creeps through right here. So the grind's a little bit low here versus the rest of the knife, and I'll probably fix that when I take it to the stones later on. But I'm probably going to continue to play with it as is, maybe even do my field test with the blade as is, because it's not really going to affect performance, just something that I noticed. It does say first production run, as all new blades do, right here, and of course Bark River, and the location, and the A2 steel here. Now, one thing I do agree with Virtuovice on, not a huge fan of the sheath it comes with. As he mentioned, he talks, go look at his video, he talks more about the locking area in this leather sheath right here. I don't find that to be even visible in mine, but he has a lot more experience with the Gameskeeper and stuff, so his experience tells him that this sheath does not lock the finger guard in the sheath like it does the shorter blade knives. So I'm going to push this basically all the way in, and that's as deep as it's going to sit, partly because, as you can see, the thickness of this palm material, this handle material, is making the leather tighten up around the handle of the knife and preventing it from going any deeper in. I can't feel the blade through this thick leather. It might go slightly shallower with a wood or micarta, but Virtuovice seemed to have the same issue with his sticking up high out of the sheath. Not a super big design issue for me, because this does take the dangler modification, which I do have. This is a Bushcrafter beef sheath. I did take this off. It does fit around this piece of leather here, and it will dangle to about this height. So it does work pretty well. And this does have a loop down here, so if you wanted to secure that to your upper leg with paracord or something to keep it from flopping around, it would work for that. But for right now, I'm not going to use this sheath. I am happy it has a fire steel loop, however. I'm going to just keep it in its original bag, and what I've substituted in place of that is a Blind Horse number 9 sheath. Now, I bought this a while back to try to fit some of my larger blade knives in as a substitute. Enzo Camper was a little bit too thin for this, and the Fall Niven I wound up getting, I had Lazatel sheath, so I don't have a problem with it. This knife is long enough to fit in here pretty well, thick enough in the handle to grab a hold, and it sits deep enough that it's not going to pop out. Now, I wouldn't want to go flicking this right now, holding this in, because this would likely, with a shake or two, shoot out. There is enough retention on it and a deep enough sit to keep it from being a problem for me, but it is deep enough that I went ahead, at least for the time being, and attached a little bit of paracord to the back. Probably change the color out or something later, but for the time being, this is so when I'm wearing it, either flat on the hip, which you can do, or with the dangler portion here. I particularly like danglers. I can reach in and grab the knife and pull it out without having to get to this part right here. Now, there is a sharp enough point on here, nowhere near sharp enough to create any discomfort in the hand, by the way. It's awesome. But it is sharp enough that you can get a hold with it. Unlike my experience with this is the Blind Horse Bushcrafter. This rounded end did present kind of a ballish, what do you say, broom handle type of experience, where it can be, especially if your hands are wet or cold, this can be particularly hard to get a hold of to pull it out, even though it also just sits in there. So I've added this knot to the back so I could retrieve it and identify it if it falls, given the natural colors. So this is basically the same style fit as this knife here. The only thing about it I don't like, not a major issue, but there is no pinhole. There's no rivet down here to secure this to the leg, but I really haven't found it on a knife this long to be too much of a slap problem. So anyway, it does have a fire steel loop. It works with most fire steels, no problem. This is one I've been really eating up at home. It's a cheap one that I got, I think, at Dick's Sporting Goods. Throws a spark very well, and then just loop it around there for security. So right now I am using the black Blind Horse number 9 sheath to hold the camp and trail knife, and I like this configuration. Again, this one works, but it's a little bit high, especially if you set this right on your hip. I would recommend, if you do like this style sheath or don't want to invest in another one, that you at least spend the 20, 25 bucks, whatever it is, to get the dangler so that it'll sit lower. Again, kind of the same issue that that I had with the GSO knives from Survive. So, beautiful knife, just great fit and finish. They did a great job with the detail on it. You know, each one's gonna have its own character, just like wood grain. I really, really do like it. I actually like the finger groove. A lot of knives I have kind of have them built into the micarta or whatever, into the blade front. Here's the GSO 4.1. There's a good size comparison for you. While I had it out, here's the Blind Horse Bushcrafter. You can see it is a substantial knife. And let me compare it here with, again, this is my wife's, but it's a longer bladed knife. This is a Cold Steel Master Hunter. Put it down there at the bottom, just to give you kind of a size layout. So it is a long knife, but relatively light. I do promise to weigh it for you in just a second. This knife really doesn't have much of a finger groove, kind of has a finger recess built in here. Super comfortable. Check out my other videos to see my thoughts on this great knife, but not really you know, a finger guard built in, because the front of the knife is the same height sorry, the blade is almost the same height as the handle itself, just this is a notch grooved out. This one here does have kind of a finger groove built in, obviously, the micarta and the steel, and the blade continues straight on from there. This is my wife's again. It does have a rubber stopper finger guard, but I do like this one. It is metal, not a big deal, but one of the things I found, it is protective, it is comfortable, it's got a great curve to it, so it's not sharp in any way. But one thing I do like about this knife is when I'm stropping, it's secure to lock my finger up underneath there. So when I'm dragging it up the paddle, it does a good job. And then when I invert the knife the other way, it's a good place to set my thumb. I just find it to be very comfortable and helpful there. I also like that it's protective, and this handle is a little bit slick, so if it's extremely cold or wet, I'm a little bit safe by, from sliding up toward the handle. But overall, really cool knife. Guys, again, I'm not gonna do any cut tests or anything on this because I want to do it justice in the field. Trust me though, when I say what I've done with it is exceptionally good. I would have, I'm not going to keep a $300 knife if it doesn't do the simplest chores easily. So due to the skeletonized handle, again, Virtuovice video, excellent resource. The dude's a doctor. He, x-rayed this and shows you the tang and how it's hollowed out to save on weight, but exceptionally light knife. So let's take a look and see where it weighs in and just kind of compare it to some other stuff. So here we go. 6.2 ounces. Now on the website, I think they listed as 5.5 ounces, but remember the extra handle material and type of material will fluctuate a few, small, subtle nuances here and there in weight. So again, let's do a test. 6.2 ounces, so super lightweight. By comparison, the smaller and about the same thickness, actually slightly thinner, GSO 4.1, and it does have skeletonized handles, but to a lesser degree, 3V steel micarta scales, 6.4 ounces, so 0.2 ounces heavier actually than a knife that's significantly bigger. That's to give you some idea. Cold Steel Master Hunter, relatively light knife, 5.9 ounces, so kind of in the same ballpark. This is a heavy knife, 01 steel. You can't take the handle apart, but not skeletonized tang as far as I'm aware. This is an 01 steel, again, the Bushcrafter, 7.3 ounces. So, noticeably heavier. Here is the SE4, 7 ounces. So if you're at all familiar with the SE4, it has a little bit of heft to it, about the same thickness. Of course, this isn't continued. This is also the, I don't know if that's going to focus there, but this is also the swedge grind. So just by comparison, 7 ounces. There's a good, hopefully a size comparison here for you. And 6.2 ounces. So, 0.8 ounces different, almost an ounce different. But, Virtuovice says it too. It feels even lighter than it is. I think it's because it's such a long blade for that weight. The weight's well dispersed, but your mind's telling you this knife should weigh more than it does. So that, I hope, gives you some sort of idea, again, how it compares to some other of my favorite knives. Let me put this butt to butt so you can get an idea there. So a longer blade, light, beautiful design, wonderful material. Again, I'm going to move this out the way. Love the sheet porn. Hopefully this is focusing here. I don't know if it is or not. Can't tell from my angle, but there you go. Thicker scales. Good contour without being sharp. Nice job, Bark River. And again, DLT, Chris, an excellent job helping me pick out the knife that I wanted to get. Anyway, guys, there's my commentary. I hope you found it helpful. I do plan on doing an outdoor video later on where I take this through all the normal paces, maybe even a little bit more, but that will be several weeks to come because my schedule is wicked busy. As usual, guys, I hope you found that entertaining or answered some questions or somehow beneficial, but if nothing else, cured a little bit of boredom because we all need that from time to time. Until next time, guys, I hope you'll be safe and enjoy all your knives. Until then, God bless.